You know, I hate to say it, but the barrier to entry for competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! Is about to be extremely high yet again. Yeah, I'm pretty sure the next format in about 4 weeks' time is gonna be really, really expensive because as you guys know, we just got some brand new staples, quote unquote. So in Infinite Forbidden, they gave us Mulcharmy Perulia, which is basically a mainstay staple in every side deck now, allowing you to draw a card whenever your opponent summons a card from their hand, which basically stops them from playing because every deck just summons from hand when they initially start their turn. And now in Rage of the Abyss, we got two brand new staples in the form of Dominus Impulse, which stops any effect that would special summon a monster. It's absolutely crazy. In a lot of situations, it makes it so a given deck actually has 6 copies of Ash Blossom. Yes, I'm talking about Branded literally getting obliterated from the format, for example, or even decks like Labyrinth being able to be hit by Ash Blossom, but now Dominus Impulse as well on their Welcome Labyrinth cards. And of course, this card locks you out of using Light, Wind, and Earth monster effects. But I mean, in the right deck, you just don't have to play any light monsters. The Fiendsmith cards don't really have a lot of play now that the main card has been banned from the archetype. I mean, it doesn't help that this card is literally $70. It was $30 for the first couple of days when it was released, but then people realized it was so broken that they had to double its price, alongside the $60 Mulcharmy Perulia, which also doubled its price after being $30 on release weekend. And yeah, don't get me started about the $120 Mulcharmy Furloughs, because this one we are never going to recover from. But the biggest issue with these cards is not only is every deck going to have to play it, but we are actually getting some brand new archetypes that are going to power creep the existing ones. Yes, it's literally hard to believe that they would power creep cards like Snake Eyes or Yugiohs or even Tempai Dragons, but it's actually happening in December when we get Crossover Breakers, which includes a brand new archetype Ryzeo as well as the Malice. And both of these decks are very, very powerful. And the reason why this deck in particular is so powerful is not only for its consistency, but the fact that they basically printed a deck which is extremely powerful into the aforementioned staples. Yes, this deck plays very, very well into Dominus Impulse because none of these card effects that special summon from hand actually activate. So Ryzeo are basically a level 4/rank 4 focused XYZ spam deck, a lot like Sprites, and none of these monsters actually activate in your hand to special summon themselves out. So it's kind of like Black Witch or Cyber Dragon. You just place them onto the table, and then from there you can just activate their effects on the field, which means cards like Dominus Impulse are just not very good because you're able to just overlay and not activate any cards that are actually special summoning. Then there's the issue of the Mulcharmies, so Mulcharmy Perulia and Furilos. The main XCs in this archetype is none other than Ryzeo Detonator, which is a card that says when your opponent activates a card or effect, you can detach a material from this card to destroy one card on the field, and it's not once per turn, which means this is a crucial end piece to the actual end board for Ryzeos. And yes, they can actually establish basically 3 rank 4 monsters off of one single card. But the point is, if you actually get hit by a Mulcharmy Perulia or a Furilos, you can still establish a detonator on the field without giving them more than one draw, which is just insane because you're getting basically no value out of the Mulcharmies, and you're still ending with a card that can pop multiple cards on the field, which your opponent is going to have to deal with. And again, you made it off of one single card. So Ice Ryzeo is a monster that upon normal or special summon allows you to special summon a Ryzeo from your deck, which means if you lead off with this into Mulcharmy Perulia, they're drawing one card for your normal summon, but they do not draw any other cards because you just end on a detonator by special summoning an extender from your deck directly. If they activate Mulcharmy Furilos, you could do the exact opposite with your other extenders like X Ryzeo or Thode Ryzeo, special summon a bunch from your hand, and then just overlay a single time for detonator, so they only draw one card. And of course, they have to deal with your detonator pops as well as 4 other cards in your hand. And this deck can actually play a lot of non-engine. They're playing more than 20 non-engine in this deck because it's another one of those hyper-consistent one-card decks, full board decks that Konami's just shoving down our throats. Yes, we had like Tempai, Snake Eye Ash. You know, these decks are full combo of one card. It seems the future of Yu-Gi-Oh! Is just one card, entire combo, either you stop me or not, and the rest of my deck is actually non-engine cards, whether that be hand traps or board breakers. So this deck is no exception. When you're actually staring down a detonator alongside up to 4 hand traps, you can't really do a lot, even though you use Mulcharmy Perulia or Furilos or even Dominus Impulse, right? So it's kind of interesting that Konami's already creating a deck that just counters the cards that they just printed in a vain attempt to actually slow down the game. I think that was the point with Mulcharmy cards. They wanted to slow down the game a little bit so there's some passing, some back and forth, and make it so going second, you know, is not nearly as bad as it previously was because you had to deal with a lot and you had to have multiple hand traps in order to stop them. But now the Mulcharmies kind of give you that access to one single hand trap that would often stop your opponent and make them end on a weaker board so you have a chance at pushing through. true, but that's not the case anymore. Yes, the Ryzeo M board will be weaker, quote unquote, with one single detonator instead of having detonator and dual drive and potentially Abyss Dweller, Tornado Dragon, Baguska, Giant Hand, whatever the heck other rank 4 they want to put on the field. But still, you're dealing with a detonator, your Purlias didn't do anything, and you're getting diminishing returns because drawing additional copies of the Mulch Armies are going to be effectively dead on your turn. And when your deck has multiple copies of them still in your deck, and the chances of drawing one is actually quite high, it's not exactly the greatest feeling. Yeah, it's basically going to be another pure Zodiac format again. If you guys were playing during 2017, Zodiac was one of the strongest tier 0 decks of all time because you basically had one card starters, and back then the game didn't have a lot of decks that could do that. One single card allowing you to overlay multiple times and get multiple cards off of that one card. So you're amassing cards off of Zodiac Broad Bowl by searching your deck and replacing itself, and then you're overlaying for Zodiac Trident to pop your opponent's cards while you have follow-up on top of hand traps or non-engine cards. And now Ryzeos are doing the exact same thing, and of course Zodiacs also played very, very well into hand traps. You didn't care about cards like Ash Blossom Joyous Spring, which at the time just came out and was actually used against the rest of the decks to push Zodiac even higher than they already were in the metagame, right? So it's kind of crazy that we're coming back to this. We have Ryzeo Dual Drive, who's basically Broad Bowl on crack. It allows you to detach 2 materials to search your deck for up to 2 Ryzeo cards. It doesn't have to be monsters, so you're going to be getting a lot of advantage. This deck also plays very well into existing high impact hand traps that would previously be game winners. Cards like Dimensional Shifter are not very effective against this deck because they don't really care about the graveyard. They can still overlay for Detonator even on their Shifter and still wall up with hand traps. It's kind of like the same result, and you're hand ripping yourself for one card. So it's crazy that this deck actually, it's not only good because it's consistent. Yes, it's very, very consistent. We have 3 copies of Bonfire, and these guys happen to be Pyro, so you can search 2 of the actual extenders / starters in the deck. But the main thing is that they're so good into the existing high impact hand traps that are in the format. Now, of course, we do have Dimensional Barrier, which is like the last saving grace, and everyone's probably going to be citing that card because back in the Zodiac format, people were main decking it because Zodiacs were just so prevalent, right? So Barrier is going to be everywhere calling XCs, but the thing is, the deck still plays a lot of hand traps. So if they're stopping you from playing, that Barrier is not going to do anything but skip one single turn, right? Like if you don't have a board with Dimensional Barrier, it doesn't really do anything, and it's going to be hard to set up a board if your opponent's going to be hand trapping you, which leads me to think that we're actually entering a potential almost tier 0 format with Ryzeo just being so good into the hand traps, so it kind of forces that catch-22 where you have to either play Ryzeo or you're just weak to the other hand traps and you're playing at a disadvantage. I just thought it was kind of interesting that Konami is finally reprinting cards, but it seems like anytime they reprint, it's always like they're trying to catch up. It's like they're never caught up to the latest and greatest thing. They're always releasing new staples, new archetypes, and new cards that you have to inevitably get if you want to play competitively, but they're reprinting cards, you know, from back in the past. Remember when they reprinted Warlord Savage Dragon and Baron Fleur? Well, by then there were already new cards coming out, right? And same kind of deal now with SP Little Knight and Thrust finally getting reprinted, but there are a lot of cards that we need to get our hands on, including the Mulch Armies, Dominus Impulse, even cards like the Fiendsmith, like last format, were extremely expensive, and you had to pick up those cards while the other cards were getting reprinted. Those cards just came out, so you had to pick them up and spend, you know, multiple $100s in order to be able to play competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! So we're kind of trickling towards that route, and not only do you have to obtain these new hand traps, but you have to buy the Ryzeo cards or whatever other decks out there, and the engines for the new cards are not going to be cheap, guys. Ryzeo is going to be in a side set. There are going to be a lot of secret rares, in my opinion, that are going to be hard to get, so people are going to be cracking the set, but side set cards never get reprinted for the longest time, and the cards just trickle up in price when everyone's playing them, especially. So I think it's going to be very, very expensive to pick up this deck. Yeah, it's going to be one of those formats. I mean, I don't know what to say. Yu-Gi-Oh's always been like this. If you've been playing as long as I have, you know, the turn of the decade, like more than 10 years, we know that this has always been the case. Cards like Dark Arm Dragon were $300. We had cards like Max C that were $130 in the prime, Tour Guide $150 each, and this was over 10 years ago. So we're adjusting for inflation. They were actually more expensive to play this game back in the day, but now we're kind of, you know, seeing a rinse and repeat where we're gonna have to shell out money from our wallets in order to buy things. Konami has realized that people are still gonna buy cards inevitably, no matter what they short print or what they do for rarities. So unfortunately, we are gonna be seeing that, I think, in about a month's time when the Crossover Breaker set drops. But I'm curious to hear your guys' thoughts. What do you think? Are there any potential solutions to this? Are you guys pleased, you know, with the reprints so far? I mean, I'm personally happy that cards like SP Little Knight, you know, Trident Dragon, a lot of cards that were previously expensive are getting reprinted. But again, we are kind of in that inevitable bubble and that problem that exists forever for Yu-Gi-Oh! Where there will always be new cards coming out that will still be expensive. So I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts. Like this video if you haven't already. Subscribe. We'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks a lot for tuning in. Bye-bye.